Western civilization was built on mysteries. But what lies behind them? From the mysteries of ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, to the later order of the Rosicrucians, Freemasonic organizations, and the many occult societies that have flourished in their wake. Behind the official story of Western civilization lies its many mysteries. Perhaps most mysterious of all, however, is the mystery of Babylon. One of the oldest recorded civilizations, its legacy has survived across the ages through its many incarnations, the many empires sprung from its loins, carrying on its legacy and mystery. Indeed, the mystery of Babylon is all around us. But what happens when we lift the veil? What do we actually find? What finds us? Is it possible to venture into this world without getting lost? After all, historically, civilization's deepest mysteries have been guarded by its most adept, its priests, its poets, its statesmen, and sages. And historically, a society's most sacred knowledge was preserved through these mysteries. From creation myths to sacred stories, its gods, and the innermost knowledge of man himself, one encountered the very image of man, the mystery that is man, which shaped the world at its deepest spiritual and psychological level. Those who controlled this sacred knowledge ultimately determined man's understanding of himself, his fate, his lot, his place, his purpose. But while such knowledge was often guarded by society's most adept and cultivated minds, power over society's sacred myths and images hasn't always fallen into the right hands. Such power could be used to conceal civilization's most sacred knowledge in order to better preserve it, or it could be used to suppress it, to conceal it, in order to better control such knowledge. Indeed, many of Plato's most ambitious works, including the Republic and the Laws, dedicated large swaths of their expositions to determining which images of man should rule, who should determine these images, and which mysteries and allegories were most suitable to preserving these truths. While the modern mind believes everything true is explicable, since time immemorial, wise men have known that at the heart of every great truth lies a mystery. Just as behind every man, there lies a soul. Behind every veil, a visage. And behind every symbol, a meaning. Whether the real mysteries of Western civilization can ever be fully reclaimed remains up for debate. What is certain is that if its deepest truths are to be unveiled, we must first come face to face with that Scarlet Woman. Said otherwise, the only way out of Babylon is through Babylon. Rewind to the 6th century BC. while ancient Greece and its Ionian allies took forward strides in the sciences, arts, and statecraft, the people of Mesopotamia toiled under the yoke of the evil Babylonian Empire. As author Charles Tate reports in his series, The Truth About Plato, the nature of the Babylonian system is best understood by examining the priesthood that controlled it, the cult of the ancient god Marduk. Babylonian literature tells us that the Marduk priesthood traced its origins to the days before the flood. This antediluvian origin story supposedly justified the Marduk cult's enslavement and taxing of the entirety of Mesopotamia and beyond. In the middle of the 6th century BC, the Babylonian priesthood controlled a network of tax-collecting temples spanning what is today the Middle East, from Egypt to the Fertile Crescent. All social and economic life was organized around the tax farming policies of the Marduk priests, which plunged Babylonians ever deeper into rural backwardness. The black-headed ones, as the priests called the Babylonians, were little more than slaves. The temple owned their land and most of their labor, and collected their gifts of grain to Marduk after every harvest. The epic Enuma Elish informs mankind that it was created solely to work and sustain the gods. They were tasked with maintaining fields, irrigation works, and offering food and clothing to the divine statues in the temples, thus relieving the gods of all their worldly concerns. According to this epic, humans were created using the blood of Kingu, the leader of a rebellious divine faction that wreaked havoc across the cosmos until he was slain by the supreme god Marduk, thus restoring order. Due to their origins, humans were seen as part of a fallen, inferior creation, whose redemption lay in their subordination and service to Marduk. The prophecies of Marduk's high priests and oracles were considered to be the infallible will of the gods. No Babylonian king dared wage war or make peace without first consulting the oracles of the Marduk temple. In 550 BC, the priests of Marduk began preparation to extend their looting operations to the trading and manufacturing city-states in the Greek orbit. Greece had become one of the wealthiest and most advanced civilizations in the Mediterranean region, thanks to its innovation in statecraft, the sciences, and trade. Realizing that their own virulent tax farming and slavery policies had left them militarily impotent, the Marduk priests searched for a new host that could serve as their martyr lord. They found King Cyrus of Persia, who in 550 BC overran the small neighboring kingdom of Media. Under Marduk's sponsorship, Cyrus was to rise from ruler of the then insignificant Persian kingdom to conquer the world from the Mediterranean to the Himalayas. The rich kingdom of Lydia's king Croesus was the first target for Marduk's new martyr lord. However, the way Lydia was tricked into destroying itself reveals the true nature of the Babylonian system. You see, Croesus didn't attack Persia after consulting with his own advisors. He made the decision after consulting the Temple of Apollo. There, he received the following cryptic prophecy.
If you cross the river, a great empire shall fall.
So Croesus believed the oracle's prophecy meant certain victory. But the great empire to fall wasn't Persia. It was his own. Despite his close alliance with mainland Greece, Croesus was crushed by Cyrus's army in 547 BC. The subjugation of the nearby Ionian cities followed within the year. Greece's allies quickly fell, and in short order, the entire eastern Mediterranean coast had succumbed to Persian dominance. Now, the institution which set this chain of events into motion and ultimately sealed Croesus's fate warrants closer examination. Much like the Temple of Marduk, whose priests created and spread the Apollo cult, the Delphi Temple was no religious shrine. It was the political intelligence operation of an enemy oligarchy. This oligarchy had insinuated the cult of Apollo first along the shores of Ionia, and then into Greece itself, likely before the Dark Ages. Located in the city of Delphi on mainland Greece, the oracle was at the center of a network of temples which worshipped the god Apollo and spanned the Greek world. Herodotus portrays the Temple of Delphi as a central hub of wealth in the Greek world, with such renown that it was considered to be as familiar to foreign leaders like Xerxes I as their own, and it was renowned for its vast size and ornate design. As a cult center in touch with temples throughout the Greek world, the cult of Apollo's information was nearly limitless, and it was passed down from generation to generation of Delphi priests in the form of sacred lore. In fact, to this day, much of our knowledge of ancient history comes from an actual priest of Delphi, Plutarch. While the Temple of Marduk dated to the 2nd millennium, the earliest known records of Delphi dated to the 7th century. In fact, Delphi's patron god Apollo was never originally part of the ancient Greek pantheon. Historical evidence suggests Apollo was somehow brought in from the east and snaked his way into Greek culture. Exactly who or what inserted Apollo into Greece, we'll probably never know for certain. What is clear is that the Temple of Apollo and the Temple of Marduk were by no means strangers. While often considered a Greek institution, the Temple of Apollo was by no means an ally of the Greeks. In fact, the temple demonstrated its bias in favor of Persia during some of the most pivotal moments in Greek history. First, it played a key role in destroying the Greek allied kingdom of Lydia, one of the wealthiest kingdoms of the world at the time. After Croesus's defeat, Apollo's oracles urged the Ionian cities to abandon resistance to Persia. After a few clashes between the two sides, the Ionians obeyed Apollo and pledged fealty to Persia. In 480 BC, at a pivotal moment of Athenian resistance against Xerxes, the Temple of Delphi encouraged submission to Xerxes just as he prepared to invade, asking the Athenians,
Why sit you, doomed ones? Fly to the world's end, leaving home. All is ruined.
But the Athenians insisted on better advice and finally crushed the Persians at the Battle of Salamis. So would begin a centuries-long battle between classical Greek civilization, defended by a highly skilled and cultivated citizen army, and the backwards marcher-lord system devised by the high priesthood in Babylon, the Persian model. Once its assignment was completed, Marduk brought his marcher lord home. But now a new chapter would begin. This time, Cyrus was given the task of conquering the Babylonian king, Nabonidus. The king had made the mistake of trying to assert his royal prerogative over the Marduk priesthood. In 538 BC, Cyrus entered Babylon at the invitation of the priests, and after dispatching Nabonidus' troops, declared his submission to Marduk. Thus ended the continuous 1500-year reign of the Babylonian Empire. The Persian victory over Babylon's king Nabonidus was a pivotal event in ancient history, although its significance is universally misunderstood. For although it marked the end of the Babylonian Empire, the oligarchical priesthood that stood behind the throne of Babylon, having bled one empire dry, continued to rule through the agency of the kingdom of Persia. With the help of this new host, the priesthood had strengthened its grip on the Middle East and created what was to become one of the greatest empires in history. And it was this new Persian model of empire that was to become the bitter moral enemy of Socrates, Plato, Xenophon, Alexander the Great, and the allies of the Platonic Academy. As this new system of empire crystallized, a fresh round of machinations would be unleashed against the city-states of classical Greece. While rarely admitted or discussed by the leading academic priesthood of our own days, this new Persian model of empire would give rise to what became the Democratic Party in Athens. The rise of the Democratic Party began with the ascension of the ancient Alcmaeonid family. After years of exile, the family was able to return to Athens thanks to the Apollo cult. The family financed the reconstruction of the Delphi Temple, which had mysteriously burned down decades earlier. And in return, the temple convinced the Spartans to invade Athens and overthrow the tyrant Hippias. At that point, Athens fell under the rule of a democratic Alcmaeonid operative, Cleisthenes. In fact, two of Greece's most famous political leaders had a curious relationship to the temple through their family lines. Both Pericles and Alcibiades, leading democratic operatives during Greece's so-called Golden Age, descended from the Alcmaeonid family on their mother's side. Both of them would lead Greece into disastrous policy directions that would seal Athens' fate forever. Pericles would undermine the traditional leadership of Athens by sidelining its most respected and authoritative legal institution, the Areopagus. Democratic reforms made way for new mass juries ranging anywhere from 500 to 2,000 citizens. These new large juries held ultimate power over decisions of war and peace and foreign policy. As a result, the importance of persuasion and public speaking took on a radically new role in government. It became the crucial element for shaping public perception and manipulating large emotional crowds. Persuasion and sophistry took precedence over all other considerations, from evidence to careful analysis of facts, to history and precedent. Leading sophists of the day like Protagoras even became Pericles' trusted advisors. The leading families of Athens vied to purchase the services of talented orators who could teach their children how to sway the opinions of the masses. So, the Golden Age of sophistry flourished, falsely referred to as the Golden Age of Pericles. Of course, the true beneficiaries of all these radical reforms and the emergence of radical democracy wasn't Athens or any Greek state, but something else entirely. Alas, after Athens and the Greek city-states finally succumbed to their mutual destruction, the once formidable anti-Persian alliance was dissolved. By order of the Persian king, the Greek states were now barred from forming any alliance that could pose a threat to the empire. This was known as the King's Peace of 386 BC. Only once more would the Persian Empire be opposed, and this time nearly defeated for good, thanks to one man, Alexander the Great. However, after returning from his Indian campaign in 326 BC, Alexander chose to settle in Babylon, where his army would rest while he and his advisors planned the final phase of Persia's destruction. Unfortunately, upon his arrival, Alexander was greeted by the priests of Marduk. They made a prophecy. Entering the gates of Babylon would be fatal to him. If he wished to avoid any bad omens, he should avoid the city, or if he absolutely needed to enter, he should do so only from the east. At first, Alexander heeded their warning and decided to take his army eastward. But the sheer impossibility of the journey quickly became apparent. He was never supposed to make it. Finally, Alexander disregarded the Marduk priesthood and forced his way through the gates of Babylon. That night, when feasting in a secured room with only his closest allies and advisors, Alexander suddenly fell sick. Within a few days, he was dead, most likely from poisoning. While classical Greece ultimately succumbed to its own moral and intellectual decay, and Persia never recovered from the strategic onslaught led by Alexander, history suggests the Persian model never really died. Like any good slime mold, it simply found a new host. After all, no king or emperor in Rome waged war or made any major policy decisions without first consulting the Sibylline books and their high priests. Towards the end of the Second Punic War, a Sibylline oracle predicted that a Roman victory would be sealed if they introduced the foreign Phrygian goddess Cybele into Rome. So in 204 BC, the Roman Senate decided that the patrician Publius Cornelius Scipio should harbor the foreign goddess in his home until a temple had been built. Finally, the great mother cult of Cybele was successfully transplanted into the empire. In fact, the Roman Empire arguably boasted of the most extensive network of mystery cults, from the Cybele Addis and the Great Mother cults to those of the later Mithraic mysteries. Every emperor had to be initiated into the high cults of the empire if he was to rule. Notably, and similarly to Apollo in Greece, Mithras was an Apollonian solar deity worshipped in the Roman Empire. He represented light, sun, covenant, and justice. Notably, Mithras also happened to originate from a much older Persian solar cult, and somehow insinuated himself into the West, much like Apollo centuries earlier. Under the late Roman Empire, Mithras, the Persian solar deity, rose to become the most powerful cult among the Roman elite. To this day, secret Mithraeum built under churches can be found throughout the world, including under the estates of some of the wealthiest oligarchical families in Venice, Rome, and elsewhere. But despite the subversive history of mystery religions and their hidden role within virtually every major empire throughout history, it's not to say the sacred knowledge of every priesthood is, or always was, corrupt, or that such knowledge isn't essential to preserving society. In fact, history suggests that such knowledge usually existed in a pure form and was later corrupted and reinterpreted. In his historical lecture, The Mission of Moses, Friedrich Schiller provides an account of how the ancient priests in Egypt would have originally been the guardians of Egypt's most sacred wisdom and lore. Such knowledge would have had to have been protected lest it find an unready people, or be made public prematurely before a wider audience was ready and willing to receive the new revelations. From Solon to Plato, high-ranking members of the Platonic Academy, to Alexander the Great himself, all consulted with the ancient Egyptian priests of Ammon. The fact that they were esteemed by the most admirable and brilliant men who built the classical world suggests they may very well have been the keepers of some of mankind's most sacred lore, including the history of disasters and the fate of lost civilizations. Lessons that would have to be shared with those aspiring statesmen who sought to learn the greatest lessons of history. And that was precisely the subject of Friedrich Schiller's historical lecture, The Mission of Moses. There he describes Moses' intervention into the backward Egyptian system of mysteries, where polytheism ruled, and where there existed one system of mystical initiation for the elect, and a separate system of pagan superstition for the masses. So what were the original mysteries? Schiller writes, "It seems beyond doubt that the content of the most ancient mysteries in Heliopolis and Memphis, during their uncorrupted state, was the unity of God and the refutation of paganism, and that the immortality of the soul was propounded therein. Those who partook of these important revelations called themselves witnesses, or epophs, because the recognition of a previously hidden truth can be compared to the transition from darkness to light, perhaps also because they truly and genuinely contemplated the newly discovered truths in sensory images. These ceremonies associated with those mysterious images and hieroglyphs, and the hidden truths concealed in these hieroglyphs and prepared by those customs, were collectively known as the mysteries. They had their seat in the temples of Isis and Serapis, and were the model after which the mysteries of Aloysius and Samothrace, and in more recent times, the order of Freemasons, were subsequently formed." Schiller brings attention to an ancient pyramid which bore the inscription, "I am everything that was, that is, and that will be. No mortal man has lifted my veil." He describes what these witnesses, or epophs, would have initially believed. The epophs recognized a single supreme cause of all things, a primal force of nature, the essence of all beings, which was identical with the demiurgos of the Greek sages. Nothing is more sublime than the simple greatness with which they spoke of the creator of the world. In order to distinguish him in a truly decisive way, they gave him no name at all. A name, they said, is merely a necessity of distinction. He who is alone needs no name, for there is none with whom he could be confused. Beneath an ancient statue of Isis, one reads the words, "I am what is." And on a pyramid at Sais, one found the ancient, remarkable inscription, "I am all that is, that was, and that will be. No mortal man has lifted my veil." No one was allowed to enter the temple of Serapis who did not bear the name Yao, or Yahweh, a name almost identical to the Hebrew Yehovah, and presumably with the same meaning, on his chest or forehead. And no name in Egypt was pronounced with more reverence than the name Yao. In the hymn sung by the Hierophant or head of the sanctuary to the initiate, this was the first revelation given about the nature of the deity. He is one and of himself, and to this one all things owe their existence. However, Schiller also notes that such knowledge of a supreme being in the ancient world would have come in direct conflict with the religions of the time. They therefore found it better, writes Schiller, to make the new, dangerous truth the exclusive property of a small, closely knit society, to recruit among the masses those who showed the necessary propensity for it, and to admit them into the alliance, and to cloak the truth itself, which they wished to conceal from impure eyes, in a mysterious garment which could only be lifted by those made capable of removing it. How do we know this? Well, along with the Apostle Stephen and Philo of Alexandria, several historians provide accounts of how Moses would have been initiated into the innermost sanctum of the Egyptian mysteries. Schiller writes, "The priest to whose order he belonged at the very moment he was incorporated into the royal family now took over his education and instructed him in all Egyptian wisdom, which was the exclusive right of their class." Indeed, it is probable that they did not withhold any of their secrets from him, since a passage in the Egyptian historian Manetho, in which he makes Moses an apostate of the Egyptian religion and a priest who had escaped from Heliopolis, leads us to suppose that he was destined for the priesthood. But as the cult became corrupt, the mysteries in their initiations, once used to protect the most sacred knowledge of this ancient civilization, now serve to mystify initiates and to lead them deeper and deeper into a labyrinth with no way out. But as unworthy members gradually crowded into the circle of the initiated, as the institution lost some of its original purity, writes Schiller, what had initially been a mere expedient, namely mystery, was made the purpose of the institution. And instead of gradually purifying superstition and preparing the people to accept the truth, they sought their advantage in leading them ever more astray and plunging them ever deeper into superstition. Priestly arts now took the place of those innocent, bold intentions, and the very institution which brought knowledge of the true and one God was supposed to be preserved, safeguarded, and carefully disseminated, began to become the most powerful means of promoting the opposite, and degenerated into a veritable school of idolatry. Hierophants, in order not to lose control of minds and to keep anticipation constantly tense, found it convenient to delay the final revelation, which would forever dispel all false expectations, and to make access to the sanctuary more difficult through all sorts of theatrical devices. Finally, the key to the hieroglyphs and secret figures was lost entirely, and now these were taken for the truth itself, which they were originally intended only to conceal. The corruption of this system makes clear the purpose of Moses' mission. While the true sacred knowledge would have originally included the unity of God, the immortality of the soul, and a refutation of paganism, it wouldn't be until the arrival of Moses on the stage of history that the mysteries found a new fertile ground and a new people which could begin to reap its fruits.